My name is Willem Hendricks. I'm the president for Europe, Middle East, and also Africa for Alcatel-Lucent. Still, because I think that a lot of you here know that we signed an agreement in April with Nokia to get a full acquisition from Nokia, or basically Nokia acquiring Alcatel-Lucent. We're actually in the overall process to make this happen. I think on Wednesday there will be a final bidding from a shareholder's perspective, and we hope to conclude this particular partnership, by the beginning of next year. And I think, from my perspective, I only can applaud that. I think it's really good that two of the big names come together. That I think there is a need of basically consolidation, and I think the two powerhouses together will be really a driving force for setting the tone for the future. And if you look at it from an African perspective, take into account that we have more from Alcatel-Lucent, more than 2,000 people here, same for Nokia, I think this is going to be very beneficial moving forward. I even have a blue jacket on, I have a blue tie on, but despite that, we are still not, finalized, the whole paperwork and the acquisition, so I'm here for Alcatel-Lucent. And some of my people reminded me that it's going to be the last speech of Alcatel-Lucent at AfricaCom. So I hope I'm doing it properly and good. And what I'm going to talk about today is actually a couple of things. First, talking about a little bit of the drivers that are typical for African market, and actually it comes back to what the minister said. And then secondly, what is the Network 2020 all about? And actually I'm pretty much in line with what Paulo says as well. So let's go through this. If you look really our vision, right, and I think it's really clear for everyone that Africa is the heart of tomorrow. If you look at the GDP growth, it's the highest in the world. And I think for us, from Alcatel-Lucent, it's been always, a very important market, and we have been really putting a lot of efforts to develop ultra broadband access and IP networking, across the countries. At the same time, when you look at the World Bank, and if the World Bank, estimates that 10% of additional points of generation on broadband, provides you 1.5 additional GDP points. I think it's not only our duty, but everyone's duty here to really accelerate the development of broadband connectivity on the continent, both as a basic component, but actually I think it's really, really crucial to build actually a network that is not only there to stay here today, but actually for the future, and really try and think about additional services either for the consumer, but definitely also for B2B. So what are we talking about? And you know those numbers probably way better than I do. But if you look at the 10 largest growing economies in the world over the last 5 years, 6 of them are really coming from sub-Sahara countries. And if you really look at the opportunity that we have there on the right-hand side, it's pretty massive. And I think that a lot of different things have been done well from a government perspective, and actually it leads to a growing African middle class. And the estimation is that we will have an additional 100 million people, and God, I hope more, people that are actually, will be part of the African middle class, which I call will be hungry for broadband access, who will actually have digital needs more than the analog needs, of today. So what are the drivers? Drivers today. If you're really number one, the driver and the challenge, and I think the minister, outpointed that. Urban versus rural and the development. If you really think and you look at the amount of people that are more than 1 million cities, population, actually there are more cities here in Africa with a higher population than North America. At the same time, there are 50% of the people will basically live in, rural areas. So this is a challenge, and I think at the end of the day we need to mutually, government, regulations, and we as ICT vendors and operators try to do something about it dramatically. But it needs decisions, and it needs decisions that are good across the board. And there are good examples about infrastructure and spectrum sharing, about basically open access, but unfortunately there are also others where when you have to bid for a license, it basically costs you so much that there is no way to actually can build out, additional services for the rural areas, which I see as a challenge. And I think collectively we probably need to work on this moving forward. The number 2 is trade diversification. Not an easy slide, by the way, but if you look at the African side, what it basically means is 87 or 88 rather percent of the is done by goods selling to the home countries. Only 12% is actually services. Now think about this. You know what a change over the last 15 years was for the African market. Of the top 20 partners in Africa, today 50% of that is being sold to emerging markets. In 2001, it was only 15%, which is a great positive move. Despite that, though, if you really think about the oil price and the pressure and the minerals that is happening, there is a definitely need for diversification. And I think really that the ICT sector, which also has been discussed on the panel, needs to be a fundamental driver to make this happen. The world has changed. I can be in a Cape Town apartment and do business globally without having a production site. So if you really think about the African market and you import 20% of services to your local countries, that should be an opportunity for you. And I agree with the panel, actually this is low-hanging fruit to take advantage of what we call the global value chain. The number 3, social development. Again, something that has been discussed here by the panel. By the way, there are about 450 deployments across Africa about mHealth, mobile learning, smart cities, and automotive. The one example that I want to highlight to you, which we have been involved in, actually last year we finalized that with the government of Senegal, together actually with the World Health Organization, among others, and also Sanofi, who was involved. We created actually a platform together with the government to basically, as an SMS service, to inform, people about the threat of diabetes, but secondly, more important, about what they can do to prevent it. And last but not least, if you really look about the end user coming back to the content providers, there was a deep interaction between a person who has the disease and directly to the health organization to make sure that there is an opportunity to actually save lives. And I think this is, extremely, important. And again, you need actually the push of connectivity and broadband for those particular drivers. So what are the solutions? As I said, I think it's something that both government regulation and us need to work on it together. But when you really think about the new network, and you think about the conversions that is happening between fixed and wireless, and you think also about the conversion that is happening between IT, and telecommunication, I mean, a lot is about to change. And I had a discussion yesterday, by the way, on lunch, and someone was telling me, Willem, if someone has 100 million to spend on CapEx for a network, and I only have 50, I can't compete with them. And I tend to agree on the fact that in the past it was actually the case. I do disagree these days, because the way you construct your network on the cloud and the way you actually use new technologies is more about an OpEx discussion than a CapEx discussion. And if you think, for example, about connecting branches, in the past, you had to go to the branch, put a router in there, install it up, and put the connectivity on. When you think about the whole SDN, you can actually provision from a central location, and you provision the branch 100 kilometers to 200 kilometers away. The time that you save, the money that you save, is completely different. And the value chain is completely different. That was not possible, a year or 2 years ago. And I think we're in an era of absolutely disruption and change in this particular market. And one of the things from our perspective, which I really would like you to urge, I'm working very closely with Bellops, defining the 2020 network. And if you're really thinking about building a new network, then I would urge you also to talk with those people. Because I think one thing you have an advantage compared to European, I would say, telco operators, they have so much legacy. And it's very hard when you have legacy to change it from an old-fashioned way to a new-fashioned way. When you don't have it, it's actually give you an opportunity to take advantage of those. So when you look about the new markets, what we call digital currencies, they're changed. The analog needs are moving to digital needs. You know, at the end of the day, it's all about creation of trust and time. Time, by prediction automation, will automatically lead by a better productivity of African, companies and leads to the operators about a capex and an opex reduction. And trust, which is really important in this economical frame, to build privacy and security, because that will translate in you being part of this global ecosystem. But at the end of the day, and it's not sexy. Google is sexy, Facebook is sexy, and I was a couple of weeks ago in the European Commission. The network at the end of the day is needed in order to make it all happen. If you think about, what Paolo was saying about machine to machine, connected cars, the amount of data that will be generated by that. If you think about, your tablets that you all have in front of you, the data that it will generate, it needs to be connected to the cloud. It needs to have a network that is capable of taking it. And by the way, I was last week in London, and I was very surprised to hear on the mobile phone, this is London, by the way, just to be clear, that 30% of the mobile phone, data was used on a mobile phone, which was a lot, but it tells you something. So at the end of the day, all that what is going to happen provides you with an opportunity to build absolutely a new network, which is high performance, low cost, and a personalized one, because you knew that. Because it's going to be a massive move to the cloud, which is basically an opportunity for you to touch base directly with your end user customers, read consumers, but at the same time to provide and do growth in the enterprise space. So cloud, be clear, is the foundation for creating the new digital value. And I'm not going to teach you or going to tell you why cloud and all that stuff. I think you all know. One thing I can tell you, a lot of people talk about cloud, and not a lot of people can make a cloud, which is basically there for the future. A cloud should be like IT as energy. It should be coming out of the wall and giving it to you. The way people build cloud, it's making stacks, x86 servers till the end, and then you have to make it change, and then it won't change. That is not what we talk about. But there's one thing that I want to point out, is edge cloud. And I'll give you an example of that. A month and a half ago, a South African company, which I used to deal business with, by the way, my background is IT, he calls me and says, Willem, I'm going to move my data to Microsoft SharePoint. And I told him, interesting. You're going to move your data from South Africa to Dublin. Yes. And basically, in order to keep my performance, I have to buy one acceleration, stuff like that, for 15 million to make it happen. I told him, why? Well, there's no alternative. I said, what if? What if a local provider comes to you, give you those SLA, you can have it close to you, what would you do? He says, logically, I'll keep it here. So what are we waiting for? And by the way, if you look at an Amazon or Google and Microsoft, people think they're cheap. It's not cheap at all. It's very easy to create a cloud that is competitive with them. And if you think about cloud edge, you don't even need data centers. You ship a container, which basically holds 14,000 servers, 5 petabytes of storage. By the way, it can actually work on a solar panel. You just need 6 hours sun to provide it. What an energy saving would that be? By the way, it's also part of saving the planet. So the technology is there for you to take it and really use that. Because if you think about all those machines that need to be connected, you have to be on the edge. Think about BMW connected cars. Are they going to drive to Germany and basically have data centers 500 kilometers away to connect that data? I don't think so. So think about this. This is an opportunity for you to grow the business. And if you talk about services, I know it was really, really interesting to hear Tony's things about, basically the cloud and the VCE, but I think there's more business cases on this one. Think about CCTV, the camera business. Creating a platform for cameras for you, to do that. You know how many data, how much money is involved in that particular discussion? Why don't you build a cloud platform? There's only one. There are 7 or 8 business cases that we can provide to you in order for you to make more money. I'm going to close with an example where I'm proud of. Because at the end of the day, it's connecting people of the government of Burkina Faso to basically people to make sure that they have access anywhere, everywhere to the data which is needed from the government. And you see here, it's basically a private cloud, you have a public cloud, you have developers. And it's actually the first phase. I think we can do better, but I think it's the first start for something that is good for the community and for everyone. So, I'm leaving you with this. 2 weeks ago, I was on a convention, and everyone is talking about entrepreneurship and what we should do about emerging markets. And I was on a convention of someone that basically did a pitch, and he said, my ambition would be to provide services, ICT services, for $1 a month per person for the education. I was very impressed with that. And I think probably it is something that I think we all need to aspire to. Because if we do that, things will definitely be better. And I think it's actually all of us that needs to work on making this continent, and getting the power unlocked from what it deserved. And last but not least, for all the Alcatel-Lucent people here, and actually working with all of you, I want to thank you all on behalf of all of them, the more than 2,000 people, for your trust, sometimes your patience, but your resilience in what I call a true partnership with you. And we're all hoping that we're going to continue that partnership in the new company, in the new Nokia, more fearful than ever. With that, I thank you.